Welcome back, everyone. Grab your popcorn because today's story is packed with shocking twists, emotional moments, and secrets that change everything. Let's jump right in. I have been watching General Hospital for more decades than I can count, and I have to tell you, the thought of Jason Morgan returning to Port Charles on June 13th fills my heart with a profound sense of anticipation mingled with a very heavy dose of dread. When a man is locked away in a secret WSB facility in a place as remote, humid, and unforgiving as Jakarta, Indonesia, he simply does not come back the same person. I can only imagine the cold, damp walls of that hidden prison, the agonizing isolation, and the terrifying amount of time he has had to sit alone with his darkest thoughts. Jason has always been a stoic man, a silent protector who bottles up his feelings deep inside. But this extreme level of captivity changes a human soul fundamentally. I sit here looking at the television screen, and I feel a genuine physical ache in my chest for him. Will we see the same fiercely loyal enforcer we have known and loved for all these years? Or has the oppressive darkness of that secret prison extinguished a vital part of his humanity? It makes me wonder just how much trauma one man can endure before he finally breaks, and I am deeply worried about the invisible emotional scars he will carry when he finally steps foot back on the familiar docks of our beloved town. My heart just shatters into a million tiny pieces when I think about the sheer tragedy of young Rocco Falconeri being pushed to the absolute breaking point of pulling a trigger. Seeing that innocent boy shoot WSB director Ross Cullum in the back to save Britt and Jason was one of the most gut-wrenching and emotionally devastating moments I have experienced as a viewer in a very long time. Rocco is just a kid carrying the incredibly heavy legacy of his complicated family. And the fact that he felt compelled to take a human life to protect the people he cares about is a burden no child should ever have to bear. I feel an overwhelming sense of pride, yet a deep and abiding sorrow, knowing that Jason immediately stepped up to take the fall for Rocco without a single moment of hesitation. That is exactly the kind of noble, selfless sacrifice that makes me love Jason's character so much. And I know many of you ladies watching feel the exact same way. He knew that a horrific murder charge would destroy Rocco's fragile life forever, and he willingly traded his own freedom for the boy's future. It is a beautiful, heartbreaking testament to Jason's protective nature, but it leaves me feeling so incredibly frustrated that a good man always has to suffer to cover up the desperate acts of others in this chaotic world. When I reflect on director Ross Cullum and his ruthless, calculated vendetta against Jason, my blood absolutely boils with a fierce and righteous anger. Cullum is the absolute epitome of unchecked bureaucratic power, a man who sits behind a fancy mahogany desk and plays God with people's lives over something as cold, clinical, and detached as a cold fusion project. But what really gets under my skin and makes me want to shout at the screen is how deeply and irrationally Cullum despises the beautiful, complicated romance between Jason and our dear Britt Westbourne. I have watched Jason struggle to find genuine, passionate love for so many lonely years, and seeing him finally connect with Britt on such a deep level has been an absolute joy to witness. Britt brings out a softer, much more vulnerable side of Jason that we so rarely get the privilege to see. To know that Cullum put a malicious hit on Jason simply because he viewed their loving relationship as a threat to his grand, corrupt schemes is truly sickening to my core. I find myself worrying constantly about Britt, imagining her pacing the sterile hospital floors, her heart heavy with the crushing guilt of knowing Jason is suffering in a dark hole in Jakarta just to keep her safe. How can their fragile love possibly survive such malicious, calculated interference from a man who holds all the powerful cards? I have to admit, I found myself yelling at my television screen in pure, unadulterated frustration when Jack Brennan kept getting in the way of Jason's crucial sniper shot. We all know that Jason is a master marksman, a man with nerves of steel who rarely misses his intended target when the stakes are incredibly high. I could feel the intense, suffocating tension building in that pivotal moment, knowing that Jason had the evil Cullum perfectly in his sights, wishing with all his might to end the terrible threat once and for all. But Brennan, with his maddening and clumsy interference, ruined absolutely everything. It is so utterly disappointing when you are sitting on the edge of your seat, holding your breath, waiting for the hero to finally save the day, only to have a secondary character completely fumble the golden opportunity. I cannot help but wonder if Brennan's foolish actions were born out of sheer, blinding incompetence, or if there is a much darker, more sinister motive hiding beneath the surface. Every single time I think about that tragic missed shot, I feel a tight knot of anxiety in my stomach, because that one single moment of failure is what directly led to Rocco making a terrible choice, and ultimately to Jason's horrific and unjust imprisonment. The deeper we get into this convoluted storyline, the more I realize that the WSB is no longer the noble, heroic intelligence agency we once foolishly believed it to be. It is a rotting, corrupt institution that genuinely makes my stomach turn with disgust. I look back at the countless years I have spent watching this wonderful show, and it is painfully clear that the clear lines between the good guys and the bad guys have become completely and hopelessly blurred. This insidious, creeping rot started many years ago when the sinister Victor Cassadine was director, planting his evil loyalist deep within the agency like poisonous weeds in a garden. I feel a profound sense of disappointment and betrayal, knowing that an organization meant to protect the innocent world is actually holding it hostage from the shadows. It makes me question absolutely everything we see unfold on our screens. How can we ever trust any sharply dressed agent that walks into Port Charles when the very foundation of the WSB is built on endless deceit, ruthless power grabs, and Cassadine-level madness? I strongly believe that until this deep systemic corruption is ripped out by the very roots, no one in our beloved town will ever truly be safe from their shadowy, grasping reach. The situation grows even more terrifying and complex when you factor in the Pikeman Security Group and their unholy, dangerous alliance with Cullum's loyal faction within the WSB. It feels like a thick, suffocating blanket of danger is slowly wrapping around Port Charles, and I find myself genuinely anxious for the safety of all our favorite characters. Pikeman has brought absolutely nothing but deep pain, senseless violence, and heartbreaking treachery to the canvas, and knowing that they are now essentially sanctioned by the corrupt leadership of the WSB is a truly chilling thought that keeps me on edge. I sit back in my chair and evaluate this massive, tangled web of lies, and I cannot help but feel a deep, sinking sense of despair for the future of the town. It seems like every single time our brave heroes manage to cut off one ugly head of the snake, two more monstrous heads grow back in its place to cause more havoc. The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of this global conspiracy makes me wonder if anyone, even someone as incredibly formidable and resilient as Jason Morgan, can possibly stand against an entire organized army of corrupt agents and ruthless mercenaries without losing his own precious life in the process. Seeing Jason manipulated, used, and tossed aside by powerful government agencies is a very bitter pill that I have had to swallow before, and it always leaves a terrible, metallic taste in my mouth. I still carry the deep emotional scars from that awful time when the FBI cruelly forced Jason to work against Pikeman, using his precious freedom as a cheap bargaining chip to get what they wanted. And to see his old high school classmate, the once honorable Jagger Cates, completely corrupted by the very justice system he swore to uphold, was a heartbreaking and profound betrayal. I remember watching young Jagger back in the day, rooting for him to succeed, and to see him fall so far from grace was incredibly disappointing to my soul. It makes me feel a profound, aching sorrow for Jason, who seems perpetually trapped in a vicious, never-ending cycle of being coerced into doing the government's dirty, bloody work. He is treated like a cold, lethal weapon to be aimed and fired by men in suits rather than a living, breathing human being with a beating heart, a loving family, and a weary soul. I strongly feel that Jason deserves so much better than being a disposable pawn in these endless, bureaucratic power struggles that tear lives apart. As I sit here in my quiet living room and ponder all these swirling, chaotic, and deeply emotional possibilities, I am completely overwhelmed by a profound sense of awe at the brilliant, intricate storytelling that keeps me coming back to General Hospital day after day, year after wonderful year. The incredible potential for Jason to infiltrate the WSB, to finally clear his good name, to protect young Rocco from a ruined life, and to secure a safe, happy future for Britt and Danny is a storyline of truly epic, unforgettable proportions. It touches on absolutely every human emotion I have inside me: deep fear, soaring hope, righteous anger, and a deep, abiding love for these fictional characters who feel like my own family. I am so incredibly excited to see how this dramatic summer unfolds on our screens, but I am also carefully bracing my fragile heart for the inevitable, tear-jerking heartbreak that always accompanies such massive shifts in power and loyalty. As we watch Jason bravely step out of the suffocating darkness of Jakarta and into the blinding, uncertain light of a brand new destiny, I have to ask all of you wonderful friends watching alongside me, do you truly believe a man whose hands are as deeply stained with past sins as Jason's can ever truly become a pure instrument of justice? Or is he simply trading one corrupt master for another in a never-ending cycle of pain?